this edition of Sightings. For Raynell and Terry Wallace, a second honeymoon became a hellish nightmare.
When I got sucked out onto the wing pin, my whole body was completely on fire.
Now, their miraculous story of life and death. Why is the government quietly buying land around its most secret military base?
Everyone's heard of Area 51 now because they took this public action.
Then, something is happening on this old Nebraska farm that residents can't explain.
Every time we seem to put an animal in there, they die.
There's something in the air over the Holy Land, and investigators feel it's not of this world.
The soil appeared to be melting, and there is no explanation. This does not occur in nature.
And scientific evidence that could prove werewolves are real.
Welcome to Sightings. I'm Tim White. At the turn of the century, going to the poor farm was more than just an expression. It was a real place where destitute families, the sick and the mentally ill were given shelter. Some of the old poor farms still exist today, mostly as tourist attractions. One of them in rural Nebraska was turned into a private home. And every family who's lived there tells the same story. The farm is haunted. Perched on a windy Nebraska hillside, this homestead is one of the few remaining landmarks of the great land rush of the late 1800s, and its inevitable result, an underclass of poor and needy pioneers whose American dream had turned sour. It was built in 1884 as a poor farm, and for 56 years, it was a temporary home for more than 400 people who lived and worked here.
Tramps came when they had frozen feet. Old people came when they had no place to retire. People came in when they were sick. Often they came to the poor farm to die.
In 1940, the poor farm was shut down and sold off. Among its early tenants was Jerry Clausen, who first rented the property in 1960 when her son, Stan, was just 7 years old. As soon as the Clausens settled into the main house, they felt an eerie sense that they were not alone.
We could be sitting there watching TV, and all of a sudden we'd look, and there was a dark shadow peeking around the doorway like somebody was there looking at us, you know, and it'd be there for just a few seconds, and we'd get up and go look, and there was nothing there.
The things that happened out here, those are things that live with you forever. You don't forget them.
The haunting activity seemed worse at night. Jerry's 3 children would not venture outside. Inside, they would not be alone in any one room, even for a second. A strange and frightening presence was disrupting their lives.
Sometimes we'd hear a car like out in that little lane and running out there, but we'd look out, there was no car to be seen. Out in the barn, the lights would go on for no reason at all because we never used the barn.
The light would come on, and then after a little while, the light would go back off again. Like somebody was just standing there flicking the switch on, flicking the switch off.
And the kids would say, "Mom, aren't you going to go down and see why that light is going to?" It scared them. I said, "There's no way I'll go down to that barn." Never went.
After only 8 months, the Clausens moved out. They were the last in a long string of tenants who had come but not settled into the old poor farm. The property sat vacant for the next 30 years. The main house was condemned, then demolished. The old barn was overtaken by weeds. Then, in 1989, Kathy and Ray Drawbridge bought the decaying property. They were disenchanted city dwellers who wanted to bring up their daughter, Sarah, in a rural environment. To them, the dilapidated poor farm didn't seem to have any problems a lot of sweat and a new coat of paint couldn't cure.
The real estate man on the way just mentioned that it had been an old poor farm, and we didn't think anything of it. We didn't know what that was. We just made a joke out of it and thought it was a good place for us.
Working weekends, Kathy and Ray spent 2 years clearing the land and renovating the old buildings. They experienced some haunting activity then, but dismissed it as the product of their overactive imaginations. It wasn't until they assembled a modular home on the foundations of the old poor farm's infirmary that the ghostly incidents became impossible to ignore.
When we go into the buildings, we would get the door slamming shut, feelings of being watched, strong enough that you'd actually leave the building to see if someone had pulled in.
It was the same ghostly car crunching on the gravel that Jerry Clausen remembered hearing 30 years ago.
It is so real sounding. I have even gone out onto the porch thinking that maybe it's on the road and I'm just not seeing it.
At first, the isolated incidents were curious, but not particularly threatening. Then, when the family moved in for good, things changed.
We'd come home from work and the thermostat would be on full all the way up. The house would just be cooking. At first, we blamed our daughter, but it was happening several days in a row. The back door would be locked, the house would be secure. We'd go to work, we'd come home. The back door would still be locked, but it'd be swinging open.
The haunting activity escalated, and Kathy claims it took a destructive turn when Ray was attacked by an unseen force while trying to clear some brush.
He was a little frustrated by then and started doing a little cussing and got a little agitated, and he suddenly bent over with a sharp pain in his side.
When he looked down, Ray found an L-shaped tear in his brand new shirt.
The next day at work, my husband doubled over in pain. He went to the doctors, they did an x-ray, and they saw something on his side, told him it was a kidney stone, to go home. A couple days later, he was feeling better. He had to have another x-ray, and it was gone.
Kathy came to believe that the ghosts of the past were somehow trying to reach out to the present. She began to research the Poor Farm's history, searching for clues to the identity of the haunting presence.
Caring for people.
Sightings asked paranormal investigator Peter James to visit the Drawbridge home and give the family his psychic impressions of the site. He was told nothing of the property's history or the experiences of its many occupants.
I'm getting a sense that there is a female in this house, and I have a feeling her name is Sarah. And I feel that she was very much in control and a very powerful female is what I feel. Along with her other domestic duties that she performed.
Peter sensed that Sarah liked the warm family feeling in the house.
And Sarah tells me, I'm not leaving, I'm not leaving.
Peter did not know that Sarah had already made her presence known to the family.
One night, my husband and I were sitting watching the evening news, and all of a sudden he glanced towards the hallway and turned back and immediately got goosebumps and was like, oh my God, there's someone in the bedroom. The vision he saw was so real, so clear of a woman.
Peter also felt a strong ghostly presence in the farm's old subterranean ice house. This is where the dead were prepared for burial.
There was also a cook that, do you know if there was a person of color here?
Yes.
Kathy compared Peter's psychic impressions with the historical information she had already collected. There were 2 Sarahs, but neither was a cook. Then Kathy remembered a letter she'd received from the farm supervisor's son. He wrote of his fond childhood memories of a cook who lived on the farm for many years.
She was very close to the family. She was a slave when she was 12 years old, so she told them. And she helped in the kitchen until she got too old. They called her Auntie. Auntie had her own bedroom on the main floor close to the kitchen, and that is where she died.
Auntie's real name was Sarah.
There it is. It's right here on her card. You know, that's her first name or given name was Sarah. It was just like, this is it. It just clicked. You know, this is her.
Peter was also drawn to the old stable. He didn't know that in this last doorway, the family had already experienced a terrifying encounter of their own, and yet this is where Peter stopped.
Now here I'm getting a lot of resistance. Here, I'm getting, like, I shouldn't go in there, but I'm getting a lot of resistance here. Shh, listen. Hello? Who's here?
It was here that Sarah and Kathy had seen the shadows of a tall man.
This person died within this vicinity, was someone who was very aggressive and very forceful, and the others tried to separate him from the rest.
The corner always seems dark, and every time we seem to put an animal in there, they die. We use it for storage. I mean, I got tired of washing the blood off the walls.
Time after time, Peter's impressions matched known history.
Whoa! It also feels like there might have been maybe a temporary burial ground back here somewhere. They may have at one time buried the deceased and then dug them up and moved them.
The next day, Kathy showed Sightings these pictures. The farm's burial ground had been only a few yards away from where Peter was standing. The graves had been empty since 1955, when the state had moved all the remains to a mass plot in a municipal cemetery.
I feel that an entire family of about 7 people in particular lost their lives here some time ago. And it feels like they were stricken with either cholera or typhus or typhoid.
In the old registry, Kathy pointed out that in 1894, the entire Underwood family died of typhoid in the old infirmary.
Actually, it was mother, father, 2 daughters and a son. So it was very close.
Despite their experiences, the Drawbridge family continues to restore the old poor farm and share its rich history with others. Peter James believes this will please the spirits.
Our theory is that the farm is actually starting to come back to life. There's no way I'd leave. I feel total responsibility to the people who lived here and the land.
During Peter James's tour, Kathy Drawbridge took notes on Peter's psychic impressions. She has since researched many of the names and descriptions Peter felt in the house and on the farm. Through state and county records, Kathy has confirmed the actual existence of many of the people that Peter claimed to be in spiritual contact with during his investigation.
Next, whatever landed on Israel's Shikmona beach left behind some very peculiar evidence.
To my astonishment, the soil appeared to be melting.
On a previous edition of Sightings, we brought you the story of 3 women in Israel, all of whom claimed to have had contact with an extraterrestrial being. Sightings investigated evidence at the scene, including crop circles and mysterious silicon shards. And the investigative team learned that this was not the only case in which physical evidence could be found after a UFO sighting in the Holy Land. In the annals of modern UFO hotspots, Israel has been a blank page.
When I researched my book, the only public mention of UFOs that I found were from 1952, from Haifa. There were 2 sightings. That is all I could find until Shikmona.
Mary Chamish is an author and journalist who has written about a recent rash of UFO sightings and encounters that began suddenly in 1987.
This is on the evening of Rosh Hashanah in 1987. Ami Achrai is returning home from Tel Aviv, his home in Kiryat Bialik, near Haifa. There is a beach called Shikmona, just before the city of Haifa. He sees a red object fly into the air, hover, dip.
Underneath there was a red glowing spot about 1.5 meters in diameter. There were immense flashlights, and there was a very loud noise, a whirlpool, as if a helicopter was going to crash.
He stops his car, gets out of the car, sees the object return, and there is a huge flash.
It suddenly disappeared. Only a big red spot remained, and in a second, it leaped into the sky and vanished.
Ami was shaken by the inexplicable UFO encounter. He tried to put it behind him, to dismiss it as an asteroid or a comet, but something drew him back to the scene. And in the daylight, he found concrete remnants of his experience.
Imagine intense heat burning sand and vegetation in the shape of a UFO. Inscribed in the right-hand corner, a clear-cut picture of an astronaut in front of the dashboard.
Not only was there an indelible image in the sand, testing at the site revealed the ground itself had taken on unusual properties.
The land was 671% more magnetic than usual land.
At the request of Sightings, soil samples were taken from the scorched earth at Shikmona Beach for a detailed analysis by biophysicist W.C. Levengood. His findings confirmed that the ground had new characteristics.
One was sort of astounded by the tremendous change in the ratios of the elements. For example, ordinary zinc was increased 104 times, whereas their other elements stayed absolutely the same.
But that finding paled in comparison to what Dr. Levengood found while he was preparing to take a photomicrograph of the soil sample.
As I was adjusting the camera to get the photograph, to my astonishment, the soil appeared to be melting. What I found here was that there was a coating on the soil of a very low melting material. I have consulted with a geophysicist, and there is no explanation. This does not occur in nature. There's no natural way that this amount of hydrocarbon would be on the soil.
5 months after the Shikmona Beach sighting, just 1 mile away in the city of Haifa, Rosetta Kalfan and her family spotted bizarre lights in the sky. They were able to film the UFO with a home movie camera.
We were chatting, and suddenly my sister looked up towards the window and saw a glittering light in the air. I got up quickly, and we both rushed over to the window. I told her, "Do you know what that is? That is a UFO."
The light was golden, like nothing I've ever seen in my life. A real light beam radiating out from it. It was shocking, truly shocking.
There was a UFO that stayed there 17 minutes over the sea and then disappeared very quickly until it became small as a star.
You see windows, and this is possibly the most outstanding feature. And certainly in the film, you'll see that at the beginning, Rafi Malka is clever enough to get background. There's no mistaking this as part of the features of the hill or the Haifa area. It's not a natural feature, it's certainly dangling in the air. It moves, it has lights, and it was witnessed by experts. I believe that it was a tremendously documented UFO.
2 years later, in 1991, Yossi Ben Maas was leaving his real estate business in Haifa for his home in nearby Beit Shan. Suddenly, out of nowhere, he was nearly blinded by a brilliant shaft of light.
There was a huge sheet of light. It was right before my eyes. It was spectacular. It was a very calming light, but I was afraid it would go to Beit Shan, where my friends and family are. So all of a sudden, it changes course, as if it was reading my mind, a kind of telepathy between us.
Yossi immediately called the Beit Shan Police Department.
Chief of Police, Yitzchak Mordechai, is awoken at 3 in the morning, goes outside, sees an enormous object in the air.
It looked a little bit like a boomerang, but it was a shape that I never saw before. It had a unique power and color, a special glow which was very different from anything I saw before. I didn't know how to react.
He radios in to headquarters, calls the Air Force, says, "This is what I got."
They asked for the exact location of the object. I gave them the location, and they couldn't find the object on the radar.
Because of Beit Shan's close proximity to the Jordanian border, the Israeli Defense Forces sent 300 troops into the area to track the unidentified craft.
It was dragging a convoy of armed men for 3 hours on a trail up to the Jordanian border, which is a very sensitive place, but it seems to know where the Jordanian border is, and heads back. At 5:45 in the morning, in broad daylight, it disappeared in a flash.
Chamish has developed a controversial theory that these 3 UFO sightings are part of a pattern dating back to biblical times.
People who have been studying UFOs seriously around the world have reached the consensus that the Bible is a convincing UFO story. I came to the same conclusion that the Old Testament, from the pillar, the cloud that led the Hebrews out of Egypt, that glowed at night and stopped the Egyptians, all the way through the prophets, were, in fact, UFO-related.
Chamish also believes that stories of alien abductions in Kadima, as reported previously on sightings, are also part of the centuries-old pattern.
Shikmona, they were announcing in black and white, "We are here." At Beit Shan, they're saying, "All right, now we've got 500-600 of you seeing us, and you can shoot at us if you want to." Kadima was stage 3, "We want to meet you."
And stage 4, according to Chamish, is foretold in a prophetic passage from the Bible.
From Kedem, they shall go up to Jerusalem. In other words, Kedema is the next hop towards the revelation of the UFOs in Jerusalem.
The investigation in Israel is ongoing. A sightings team is now following up on late reports of activity in the town of Yatzitz on the Mediterranean Sea. An eyewitness there claims that he has evidence of UFO contact in the form of mysterious footprints. Sightings will bring you more on this story after the investigation is complete.
Next, what the U.S. military is doing to keep Area 51 a secret.
If you cross here, they can kill you.
And how medical science explains werewolves.
Here are some of the stories Sightings is following in the news. According to the U.S. government, Area 51, a super-secret military testing ground, does not exist. But they're buying up all the land around it anyway. Since the 1950s, the United States Air Force has allegedly operated a top-secret military testing facility in this dry lake bed in the southern Nevada desert. Codenamed Area 51 and Dreamland, the base has long been rumored to be a center for Black Project research. Now, the U.S. government has begun seizing all the land around a base that does not officially exist. It is a paradox that has not escaped the attention of dedicated ufologists.
This withdrawal was intended to obscure the secret base. In fact, it had the opposite effect. Everyone's heard of Area 51 now because they took this public action.
Glenn Campbell is a self-described Area 51 activist and government watchdog. He believes the military has initiated the purchase of land where civilians have taken unauthorized photographs.
Freedom Ridge and Whitesides were places where the average citizen could go up and see this non-existent facility. It's 13 miles away. You can't make out a lot of detail, but you can see hangars. You can see the longest runway in the world. The reason they gave for this withdrawal is they needed it for the public safety. They said they needed it to keep people from being hit by airplanes up there, which was plainly ridiculous.
And as the outside perimeter of Area 51 widens, so does the facility's mysterious security net. When Glenn Campbell led a sightings investigative team to the new boundary, one of the infamous white Jeep Cherokees driven by men in camouflage fatigues appeared on the ridge.
Okay, we're at the new border, Whitesides Mountain. You used to be able to drive all the way up this road another mile, and then another mile hike to the top of that peak where you had a very clear and simple view of the base. We've got the same new signs here. If you cross here, they can kill you.
Are werewolves real? At Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas, geneticists may have found part of the answer. The legendary image of the werewolf has some basis in medical fact. Researchers have isolated the gene responsible for a rare condition called congenital generalized hypertrichosis, causing excessive hair growth on the face and torso. While this condition may have sparked ancient accounts of werewolves, modern researchers see CGH as a possible cure for baldness. 1 year ago, a white buffalo was born in the small farming community of Janesville, Wisconsin. Many Native Americans believe the birth is the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy, signaling a new age of global harmony.
The last time she came, she showed herself around 600 years ago.
Floyd Hand is a Lakota Sioux medicine man whose Indian name is Looks for Buffalo. According to legend, in order for the prophecy of hope to come true, the white buffalo must change color. And that's exactly what she did.
They come with disbelief on their face. But when they leave with not what they see, but they take something inside them. She changed an awful lot of lives. She made an awful lot of people happy. She was sent here to bring everyone together. And I guess if you want to say 60,000 people coming up here to see one little furred animal, she's doing her job.
Despite the commercial potential of thousands of visitors to the farm, the hiders aren't interested in reaping any material benefits.
You'll meet people walking up the driveway here that'll recognize who we are, or they'll ask if we're the owners. They'll shake your hand, just say thank you, and nod to heaven and walk by. How much richer can you get than that?
We'll have more stories from the news next time. Now, here's what's coming up on Sightings.
Raynell Wallace went through hell and wound up in heaven.
For the first time, I was feeling love.
And these high school students are demanding the government tell the truth about Roswell.
They're covering up stuff that we want to know about. I don't think it's right.
In 1985, Ronell and Terry Wallace were in a near-fatal plane crash that changed their lives forever. Ronell's body was badly burned, but as she chronicles in her book, the real change in Ronell was not physical. Sightings correspondent Carla Wall reports that Ronell Wallace was transformed not by the flames that engulfed her airplane, but by a spiritual burning within.
The skies over central Utah were anything but foreboding on the morning of October 9th, 1985. Terry and Ronell Wallace were preparing to board their single-engine Beach Bonanza for a short 15-minute flight. The trip was part of a second honeymoon, an adventure they hoped would put the spark back in a failing marriage. Ronell was committed to the flight, despite a series of eerie premonitions.
He says, it's just a short flight. We'll rent a car and drive home. What can happen in 15 minutes?
10 minutes into the flight, Ronell's question was answered. A violent storm blew in and the plane crashed into a snow-shrouded mountain. It was an accident that could have been avoided if Ronell had heeded her inner voice.
When you say you didn't want to go on the trip, was it a premonition that something bad would happen? Was it a chill down your spine? What was it that made you not want to go?
It was a small whispering, and I think that's how they come. You know, I think the spirit within us comes in small whisperings. I had had a vision the night before. It was real clear. It was real prominent. I woke up in the middle of the night. It was what was going to happen the very next day. And I woke up in a cold sweat, and I sat up, and Terry was sound asleep, and I started getting very panicky, and I woke him up, and I said, Terry, wake up. Promise me no matter what happens tomorrow, we're not going to get back in that plane, right?
I think she heard the voices, but she didn't pay much heed in it because, I mean, yeah, we're going to be in a plane crash. Look, it's a beautiful day. There's not a cloud in the sky, and we're heading out. So, I mean, when it started, there was no real reason for concern.
In the morning, Ronell agreed to make the flight from Delta to Provo, Utah, where Terry promised they could rent a car and drive the rest of the way home. But then there was another warning.
Before you even left the hotel clerk said something to you. What did she say?
Yeah, we checked out. We went to the front desk. I started talking to her, and she says, you're not going to fly today, are you? And I says, well, yeah, we're just making a short flight. And she says, I really don't like the thought of you guys getting in that plane. She goes, I just have this feeling. I just rather you didn't go. I'll drive you. And I thought, no, don't worry about it. We're going to be fine. We're just going to be fine. Don't worry about it.
Despite this unsettling premonition from a concerned stranger, the Wallaces took off. At first, it seemed like a perfect day for flying.
All of a sudden, the clouds came down and went all the way down to the ground. And it was as though someone had taken a white sheet and just wrapped it tightly around the cockpit.
And the whole area just became like a just massive fog in front of our face. It's like fingers of clouds just came down in to almost zero visibility.
And I said, Terry, the ground. It's coming up. The whole horizon was coming right up at us. And I started screaming, the ground is coming up, it's coming up.
And then all of a sudden the mountain was there, and that's when I just pulled back up, and she started screaming, the ground, the ground.
Quickly, Terry, right before we nosed into the mountain, pulled up on the steering column, which caused us to belly flop against the mountain. We then started skipping, you know, like a stone on water against the mountain. As we did, parts of the plane started flying all over the place. The sparks were coming out on the wingtips. I started to cry. I said, please, forgive me for everything I've done. Take care of my kids. Just take care of my kids. When I got sucked out onto the wingtip, I was completely engulfed in flames. My whole body was completely on fire.
Ronell lay immobile on the frozen wreckage. Miraculously, Terry escaped with only burned hands. At the moment of impact, Terry recalls his own supernatural vision.
I saw what was like a strong, muscular hand that was translucent, whitish, goldish, transparent-like, come like this, and I just felt peace and comfort from here that I wasn't going to get smashed.
As I looked over at the flame, Terry stood up inside the flame, and he grabbed an invisible hand, and he walked directly out of that flame. across the wingtip. I looked up at him, amazed because he was unscathed. He says, "Where's the man that pulled me out, Rennell?"
With the threat of certain death looming near, Terry knew he had to get Rennell off that mountain. It would be a 5-mile hike in zero visibility.
The skin of my hands were causing me a lot of pain. At one point, I just couldn't take it anymore, and I just yanked both of them off, and I left them on the ground.
The skin.
So we had to climb the barbed wire fences, basically burnt barehanded and ripped, which is very difficult to do. And we managed to hike down that way. And was what was amazing to me is I felt led. I felt guided which way to go.
6 hours later, the Wallaces found a road which would turn out to be only 1 mile from the nearest hospital. Terry flagged down a truck driver who radioed for an ambulance. But soon after it arrived, Rennell died.
And all of a sudden, I just let go. And at that moment, I felt peace. And it was quiet. And then in a quick moment, I was standing up. And as I looked, I could see these nurses all crowded around this gurney. I saw a hand fall off the gurney, and it was black and charcoal, and I realized whose hand that was. And then all of a sudden, it came black. And the moment it came black, I started seeing colors rushing by me. And I realized that I was heading somewhere feet first. And I got very frightened. And I could hear voices talking next to me. And I quickly, in a quick flash, had a life review of my entire life. It was just circumferenced all the way around me. And then quickly it got black again, and I got scared. I got really frightened, and I saw a beam of light coming toward me. And the moment that I looked upon that beam, there was this peace coming from this light. And quickly within that moment, the light pierced right through my soul, pierced directly through me, and I was now in it. And I felt all this peace and all this love. It was powerful. I thought, wow, this is great. It's so white. And as I started to look around in the white, I saw a woman coming from the distance moving toward me. As she moved toward me, she came and she stood in front of me. And she was beautiful. She had white hair. She was wearing a white dress. And she called out my name. She says, "Rennell. Rennell, it's Grandma." "Grandma?" "Yes, Rennell, it's me." She reached out her hand. Well, now, wait a minute. It hit me. She had died 2 years before. Am I dead?
Rennell believed she was experiencing the rarest of all visions, her life after death. And in fact, as the vision enveloped her, Rennell Wallace was declared clinically dead.
Next, Rennell's incredible meeting and message from the afterlife.
She started to whisper, "Please go back and tell everybody the key is love."
The day of their near-fatal plane crash, Terry and Rennell Wallace were forced to ignore the supernatural signposts that should have kept them off that plane. After the crash, the paranormal chain of events continued. And as Carla Wall reports, they soon became impossible to ignore.
After her clinical death, Rennell Wallace believes she was guided into a life after death by the brilliant spirit of her grandmother.
You said your grandmother had an important message for you, which was?
To go back and tell everybody the key is love.
What did she mean by that?
I learned that love was not just this emotion that you feel in your body. It is an actual power that empowers your own soul and your own life. After everything she had said to me, at one point she turned to me and said, "Rennell, it's time to go back." I said, "No." For the first time, I was feeling love. All of my life, all I ever wanted to do, and I think all of us basically want this, is to be loved and accepted. And for the first time in my life, I was feeling it. And doggone it, no one's going to take this away from me.
Renelle remembers that she did not want to return to her physical body until she was shown a vision of her future on Earth.
I saw a young man come from the distance. He was tall, he was dark-haired, blue-eyed, very handsome. And he was smiling, and he came and he stood in front of me, and he started to cry. And he said, "Mom, why are you here?" "Mom?" "Nathaniel." He says, "I need you, Mom. You have to go back." At that moment, as I looked into his eyes, I realized I needed to set my own selfish needs aside. I said, "I promise you, Nathaniel, I'll give you your chance. I promise. I swear." She says, "Renelle, go back." And she started to let go of my hand. As she let go of my hand, she started to whisper, "Please go back and tell everybody the key is love. Renelle, the key is love. The key is love." It was then that it got darker and darker and darker until I had come into this hollow body. And just before I came into it, I could see my hand off to the side of the bed. And then when my spirit had come into it, I absolutely couldn't stand it. It was an instant pain.
Renelle came back. The memory of the mysterious boy named Nathaniel, who had called her mom, haunted her and sustained her through years of excruciating physical recovery.
She was a very motivated person who became very goal-oriented and was sure that she was going to beat this, that she was not going to let this burn injury slow her down. We have guardian angels that watch over us and help us out whenever we are in need of help. And I'm sure that Renelle had such assistance to be able to accomplish what she did.
Renelle invited me to accompany her to the site of the plane crash. After 10 years, painful memories of the crash caught her by surprise.
It's so funny, I don't believe it's just all coming back. I left myself up here.
You left yourself up here? What do you mean?
Yeah. The old Renelle is buried still up on this mountain.
You started a new life here.
A new life. A complete new life. I've made my mistakes along the way, you know, with my new life. But there was a total rebirth.
Renelle survived her ordeal, and so did her marriage to Terry.
Somehow it fused us together. It's like the hands were both burnt, they're both fused together. See, so we had the same matching mittens, where people have their wedding rings and all that. They match, and so what's happened is we kind of got fused.
Today, Renelle is living the lessons she believes were taught to her by the spirit of her grandmother. And recently, the mysterious boy who beckoned her back to life came down to earth. This is Nathaniel Wallace. He's 3 years old.
Remembering hearing my children's echoes down in the valley and thinking, that's why I lived. This is the reason.
It's been 10 years since the Wallace's fateful plane crash. In that time, Terry and Renelle have given hundreds of public lectures about the importance of listening to the inner voice. But Renelle and Terry have also spent many private hours in hospitals around the country, comforting burn victims as only survivors can.
Next, these high school students don't believe it was a weather balloon that crashed in Roswell, New Mexico 50 years ago, and they're doing something about it.
A grassroots movement is underway to get to the bottom of America's watershed UFO event, the supposed crash of a flying saucer near Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. The Roswell Declaration is a one-page petition calling for the declassification of any and all government documents relating to the Roswell incident. So far, the declaration has over 12,000 signatures. 800 of those signatures were collected by high school students in one small New Hampshire town. At first, first glance, you wouldn't think Londonderry, New Hampshire and Roswell, New Mexico shared anything in common. Londonderry has the look of a Norman Rockwell painting, where people have deep roots and traditional American values. But the teenagers at Londonderry High School are linked to Roswell because of the unlikeliest of events, a 50-year-old UFO mystery that students here think is being covered up.
Students who weren't really together as far as interest in school or friends came together because of this.
It started with an assignment in Stephen Juster's fiction class to try and obtain government documents through the Freedom of Information Act.
It feels like we live in America and where we have freedom, but we don't. They're taking that away from us. They're covering up stuff that we want to know about. I don't think it's right.
The students wanted information about the alleged UFO crash near Roswell, New Mexico. They quickly discovered that the official explanation for the incident didn't seem to warrant the number of still classified documents the government refused to release to the students.
I think that the government is trying to hide something. I don't think it was a weather balloon. I just think there are too many people that saw it.
It seems to me that something incredible did happen. Something landed there that was obviously bigger than just a weather balloon. Whether it was aliens or not, I'm not really sure.
I thought it was really neat to, maybe try and get this uncovered to see if it really was an alien ship that landed or crashed, or if it was just something else and the government just didn't want us to know about it.
When Stephen Juster saw that Omni was collecting signatures for a petition demanding the release of classified Roswell documents, he saw a fun and engaging teaching tool for his class. But the entire student body became involved.
We just kind of thought it was gonna just be our little class project, and that was it. Turned into a big thing.
Yeah.
Eventually, the Roswell project grew beyond Juster's class, beyond Londonderry High School, and into every high school in New Hampshire. In all, more than 800 signatures were collected.
The plan is to send copies of them to all the senators and to all the congressmen and to the president, and hopefully get the president to sign an act saying that this material is declassified.
I think if people catch on to what we've done and say, hey, a bunch of 18-year-olds made this much of a change, what can we do as a larger group? I think if it keeps snowballing the way it has, then things are definitely going to change, because what can the government do? They can't ignore that many people.
Kent Jeffrey, the author of the Roswell Declaration, plans to deliver the petition and a list of signatories to all members of Congress and to the White House. If you're interested in signing the petition, copies of the Roswell Declaration are available through Sightings online service.
If you've had a paranormal experience, please write to us at Sightings. Sightings can also be contacted at America Online at keyword Sightings. At the Sightings Forum, download images, sounds, and QuickTime clips. Also, join us daily in our chat room, live on AOL.
Until next time, remember, no mystery is closed to an open mind. For Sightings, I'm Tim White.
Next on Sci-Fi, Dark Shadows.
Tonight on Sci-Fi's Farscape, the past is history.
If we change anything here, change the past, the future might not happen as it's meant to.
Sci-Fi's Farscape, tonight at 9.
This is Sci-Fi.
Tonight on an all-new Lex, a rematch of The Dead.
My appetite can never be satisfied. And now I will suck your proto-blood.
Sci-Fi's Lex, tonight at 10.
This is Sci-Fi.